You're live. Thank you, Sutton. Good morning. Please join me for the invocation, which will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Bow your head, please. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and all the blessings you have given us. We thank you for providing us the opportunity to serve the citizens of Elkins. We ask that you guide us in our decision-making as we strive to help our community grow and to set a budget today. We also ask that you watch over and guide our country's leaders. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. I will now call the Elkins Common Council special meeting to order and ask our clerk to take roll.
Councilor Bras Fraganera.
Here.
Councilor Chenoweth.
Here.
Councilor Kwanzo.
Present.
Councilor Friddle.
Here.
Councilor Guy.
Present.
Councilor Higgins.
Here.
Councilor Hinchman.
Here.
Councilor Lowther, absent. Councilor Parker.
Here.
Councilor Vest.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. And Councilor Lowther wanted me to let you guys know that he's actually at the hospital. He and his wife are expecting their baby, and it's on the way today, hopefully. So, all right. Is there anyone here for public comment? Please step up and give your name and your address, if you would, please. Yes.
Hi, my name is Laura Ward. I'm the Executive Director of the Randolph County Senior Center and Country Roads Transit. I'm here today to advocate for the citizens of Elkins who depend on public transit. They are your constituents, and you have done them a great disservice by proposing a 64% decrease in funding for the public transportation system, Country Roads Transit, for the upcoming fiscal year. My argument on behalf of these citizens will come as no surprise to you. I visit every year in anticipation of our upcoming fiscal year to report on your investment in transit, in the people who utilize that transit, to share stories of how that investment affects the real lives of those individuals, and to invite each and every one of you to ride transit, speak to them yourself, learn their story, and gain an understanding of the true value of your investment. The first point I would like to make is strictly economical, since that seems to be the topic of the day. We've emphasized to you since our inception in 2006 that Country Roads Transit operates on a grant that requires us to raise 50% of our operating funds through local match from local communities. We can then draw the other 50% in matching federal funds. Therefore, when you make an investment in transit, every single dollar equates to $2 of service. That's $2 infused in the local economy for your dollar investment. How many of your efforts claim that? But that also means that when you cut funding to those match dollars, every dollar results in a $2 less of service. You're proposing $9,000 less. $9,000. That's $18,000 less for transit budget. That is fiscally short-sighted on your part, with all due respect, not to mention callously disrespectful of the citizens who utilize that service. I'll remind you that we provided 11,825 rides last fiscal year in Randolph County, and make no mistake, those rides are not a small thing. They are no minor convenience to those who utilize our service. These rides are lifelines to vital medical services, increased housing options, mental health services, necessary pharmacy and grocery store trips. I would like to report that many of our riders are choosing transit because it's the green alternative, or to save money on fuel. But that's not the case. The folks who ride transit do so because they have no other way to get to where they're going. None. I've shared many stories with you over the years of our riders and the impact public transit has on their lives. I don't have time in my 5 minutes today to properly advocate for them further, to tell more stories. But I'll remind you that in addition to those stories, I've also invited every one of you to ride transit, to hear from your constituents the impact it has on their lives. Every single year, I've invited you. All due respect, and sorry if I'm wrong, but I don't believe a single person in this room has taken me up on that invitation. Not a single one. Not even did you come to listen to their stories before you decided to take an axe to that budget. That's a shame. Since you won't go to them, let me remind you who they are. They are predominantly elderly, disabled, and financially disadvantaged. They could be your mother or your grandmother who can no longer drive. They could be your disabled neighbor. They could be the young mother you go to church with and her small children. Without transit, they would miss many doctor's appointments, maybe mental health appointments, maybe they can't get their meds refilled on time, or they would not have access to the grocery store with the healthiest options. Their health would suffer, which anyone with a conscience would admit is enough reason to invest in transit. But if you need a financial reason, I challenge you to calculate the cost of increased emergency services, hospital admittance, and more from those with missed medical appointments. I would challenge you to calculate the cost of missed mental health appointments, in missed work by the patient, in cost of possible police and emergency services intervention, or even hospitalization. Did you research that cost at all before you decided to cut your local investment in transit? Did you reach out to me to ask for that research? You did not, but I believed you owed your constituents at least that. During my annual visits to you, I present data and stories, and I try to answer your questions. Nearly always, one of you has a question for me about, do you plan on expanding hours? You would like for me to expand hours. And I explain that with our current budget, we have to put, as stewards of those money, put that budget where we can make the biggest impact, and that's what we're doing. I believe it was Councilwoman Bross-Friganero who just stated a few months ago during my visit that she had read an article stating that public transit was among the top factors in determining the health and livability of a community. The mayor invited us to be part of the homelessness, drug addiction, and mental health task force because that group realized that transit would be a vital link in the process of getting help for those people. I say this all to prove that you already know the importance of transit. I'm not just preaching it to you. You are well aware of it on your own. You know it, but you choose to take an axe to it. Why on earth would you do that? I say with great confidence that this is a fiscally sound, data-proven, greatly socially impactful decision to invest in transit. Given that, isn't there another line item in your budget that could be cut, that should be cut, before making the decision and affecting some of our most vulnerable citizens? I believe there is. And respectfully, I believe it's your job to find it. Shame on any one of you who votes for a budget that cuts transit services. The people of Elkins need you to do better. Ladies and gentlemen, they expect you to do better. Please do better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning to all of you. I'm Barry Bann. I'm the president of the Senior Center Board. My wife and I met in 1966 at Davis and Elkins College. After 4 years, both graduating education, we chose to stay in Elkins. Why? Because of the people. Because how they cared, how they shared. We didn't experience that where we were from, neither one of us. And anyone who has moved into this area knows exactly what I'm talking about. A professional was paid to come to Elkins to talk about how to improve the Elkins community. I was a professional educator for 40 years. 32 years as a principal of Third Ward Elementary. I understand cutbacks. Education has gone through many. No cutbacks, however, were taking children's books away. No cutbacks were taking children's food away. Cutbacks for the organization in Elkins, as far as I'm concerned, was cutbacks for low fruit. In other words, these are organizations who volunteer. They won't mind. That's okay. Well, the Intermountain says the reason for the cutbacks was inflation, increases in salary, vendor payments, and other issues. Well, different organizations who support Elkins don't mind the cutbacks, just like they don't mind a slap in the face. Senior Center received cutbacks for transportation, as you just heard. Transportation's a 50-50 match. Federal government pays for 50, and the community pays for the other 50. It'll be interesting because Country Roads Transit had $14,000 from the city of Elkins. Now they will receive $5,000. That's going to be an interesting 50-50%. You've heard from Laura about all the things that Country Roads Transit does. I want to stop and say thank you. Thank you for the slap in the face. The other organizations and the Country Roads Transit will really appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here for public comment today?
Good morning. My name's Katie McLean. I live at 185 High Street here in Elkins. I represent the volunteers who do public gardening in our town. Although, you know, money doesn't concern us so much, we do everything for free, including getting all of our plants. Everything is all done for free. Master Gardener Volunteers, Emma Scott Garden Club, and others. And we garden at places that can't afford fancy landscaping, like the Art Center, the public library, although TerraFlora does do that, but we do some of the tree wells, the tree board, we help them too through Friends of Trees. And so I'm just here to comment that, the Comp Center, another one, that when those institutions aren't supported, it kind of takes the wind out of our sails, you know, as volunteers. If our community doesn't care to support the nonprofits, why should volunteers help? I mean, and if public gardens go to pot, then, you know, it just shows that your community is going downhill. So I just want to comment there, and as a citizen, I would like to know, I would like a little more transparency about why these cuts are needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment today? Thank you. Unfinished business, consideration of proposed FY23 budget.
Your Honor, I'd make a suggestion that we start out the discussion by considering the, budget revisions that were proposed by the administrative officers in an Excel spreadsheet that they sent to us, where they've sort of voluntarily went through and readjusted their budgets to find money to provide funds, sufficient funds for the requests made by these outside organizations by reducing the number of code books published, reducing the line item for beautification and demolition. So in my opinion, I think that would be a good place to start, since those are the individuals that know the budgets probably better than anyone and are tasked with sort of running the city on a day-to-day basis, and might streamline the discussion and make things a little bit easier.
May I make a statement?
Absolutely.
Although I agree with Mr. Chenoweth, I'm very interested in going line by line, because thank you, Tracy, for sending this information to us. It was very helpful. And some things have dramatically changed, and I really want to know, you know, what's causing the increases. So it would be helpful to me to be able to make better decisions here today.
You're probably going to need the microphone, so. And while Sutton's getting the microphone set up, I just want to say I appreciate the Finance Committee's efforts in this unenviable task during this financial times. I appreciate the hard work that the admin officers have put in on this budget. We've recently adopted a compensation package to address the fact that 25% of our city employees have been here for 1 year or less. That turnover is killing the city of Elkins for a financial drain on the city. So we have to have competitive wages. We are trying our best to do what we can to make everybody happy. Is that realistic? Probably not, but we're willing to work together, and I appreciate the efforts of this committee as well.
Okay, so up on the screens, we're going to start with the revenues. The very first line item you have is the unassigned fund balance. This is typically your carryover balance, your excess revenues over the expenditures in the previous fiscal year that occurs in July, that we're required to report to the state by the last, I think it's by the 18th of July. So let's look at the 2018-2019, which is the fiscal year 19. The actual carryover or unassigned fund balance was $150,000. In the next fiscal year that ended 2020 was $1,166,022. Now, the biggest part of that was the CARES Act money. In fiscal year 21, which was just the previous fiscal year, we had a carryover of $283,237. In this current fiscal year, in July of 21, we had a carryover of $610,597. So that's why I feel comfortable of projecting a carryover amount. But you see where I have under request a budget, I've wiped that out, as we'll just kind of start from scratch. The next line item under taxes is committed community outreach. That is any revenues received for the police department to do community outreach. I have budgeted $0 for that. The next line items from current year taxes all the way down to interest B are the county taxes that we get annually. As you can see, if you look under our current requested budget, we're budgeted to get $1,090,907. That is a fixed number that goes into our budget. We do not play with that number whatsoever. If you look at historically, back in fiscal year 2019 for current year taxes, we received $917,000. Fiscal year 2020, we received $909,000. Fiscal year 2021, $944,000. This current budget year, we were budgeted at $1,038,754. As of December 31st, which is half of the year, we received $633,355. And we're currently, I believe, right around $900,000. We will not see the current taxes for that. Now, some of that is made up in prior year taxes, supplemental taxes that also come through. But if those don't come through, then it's going to be a deficit for the county taxes for us, the revenues. Then if you go further down to gas, oil, and severance tax, that is a one-time payment that we get from the state. I am budgeting $12,000. As you can see, this year we received $12,793. Excise tax. I'm estimating $290,000. We're kind of all over the board from 364 down to 282 to 321. We currently budgeted 290. And through December have received $139,000. The 2% utility tax, we're budgeting $67,000. This current budget year, we've budgeted $65,000. Through the end of December, we've received $37,000. Historically, we've received $66,000, $58,000, $71,000. Business and occupation tax. We're budgeting $1.3 million for this year. Historically, we've received a little over $1.5 million, $1.25 million, $1.335. As of December 31st, we have received $678,000 that was budgeted for $1,250,000.
Excuse me just a minute.
Yes, ma'am.
In that line item with the 18-19 budget with 15 and now projected at 13, can you give me some idea of why that is?
I can. A lot has to do with projects that are being done. And if that probably was a project, it may have been due to Some in part may be due to Mon Health. I'd have to look at the time frame, but I'm just trying. That's the B&O tax, yes. We may very well, with the Tigert Hotel project, be receiving more B&Os, but I am very cautious when it comes to budgeting revenues because it's a lot easier to decrease spending as opposed to going all out on your expenditures, overestimating your revenues, because then you're in a bind, okay? The B&O penalties, we've budgeted $5,000. Once again, that generally, that fluctuates. So that's been anywhere from a little over $29,000 to $142,000 to $16,000. So far this year, we've budgeted $17,000, but we've received through December $1,705. Now, I will say for the increase of the $142,000, as you all recall, you all accepted a contract with Datamax, who goes out and finds businesses doing work in Elkins that we truly don't have the manpower to go out and do, and all the things that we need to find that. So with those, over a 3-year period, anybody that they find for business license and B&Os, that revenue is split 50-50. And then once that contract for that company is done, then the revenue is 100% back to the city.
Are we still using them?
Yes, we will use them until they have exhausted
Can you use your microphone,
everything.
please?
Yes, yeah, until they can't find anybody else, but they work tracking down vendors through the hospital, vendors through the schools, through the county. I mean, they really do a lot of legwork that we just don't have the ability to do. Then we have the wine and liquor tax. It's budgeted at $102,000. Through December, we've received almost $48,000. So I'm budgeting that at $95,000 for the next year. And if you look at historically, back in fiscal year 2019, we received $150,000. But then the state legislature made a change. So the following year, we lost $49,000.
What was that change, Tracy?
How far out the city is able to capture that tax. So now that bulk of the tax goes to the county, not to the city anymore. Then we're going down to the animal control tax. This is tax that we receive from the county, our portion of dog taxes that they collect. The hotel occupancy tax. We're budgeting $160,000 for this the current fiscal year. We have budgeted $141,000. Through December, we've collected $109,000. Let's look at historical figures here. Back in 2019, we received almost $211,000. That was pre-COVID. Fiscal year 2020, we received $166,000. Fiscal year 21, just under $133,000. So our revenues in the hotel tax, I feel, are starting to come around a little bit, but once again, it's unknown from where we were before. And I will say with that, the state also passed another bill. Starting this January, individual companies do not report any of their hotel tax to us like they did before. We are relying on Expedia, Vrbo, HomeAway, any of those to pay us directly. There is not a checks and balance that the state requires. So we get a check, have no idea who's paying. That is per the state. So we don't know when we'll get that money. We've received 2 checks since January. Have no idea when we get that money. Poor state change. And the biggie, the other biggie on the end, municipal sales tax. Fortunately, for COVID, that has increased for us. So well, let's start historically. Looking at fiscal year 19, we received $1,063,000. Fiscal year 2020, $1,131,000. Fiscal year 21, $1,296,000. For the current budget, we've budgeted $1.2 million. Through December, we've received $725,000. We will have the best revenue fiscal year as of this year. So therefore, I'm sorry for getting a little jumbled here. We're receiving well over $300,000 each quarter for that. So therefore, I am budgeting $1.4 million. And we do have one more. So what is included in the December 31st, we've had an additional quarterly payment. We have one more quarterly payment coming in April. Anybody have any questions about that? With that said, as I have mentioned before in meetings, our sales tax, the county tax, the B&O tax are our three main revenue sources. Any questions regarding
I
that?
do just have a question. In sales tax, has that been discussed at legislature as well? To be removed, to take it away from us?
Well,
The 1% tax, has that been discussed? Because the reason why I'm asking this question is because this is important in relationship to our community to understand that it's important in order to run a city, you have to have some money.
I'll defer to our counselor for that, please.
So the only reason you can collect the municipal sales tax, that 1% beyond what the state collects, is because you're a home rule city. And that is now a permanent program. So when that got established, was it in 2016, Tracy? I'm sorry, whatever year,
Yes.
I think it was.
Our sales tax? Or-
What was the first year? It was
18.
18 was the
Yeah.
first year it was collected. So you've been able to collect it since then. And fortunately, that even though there are a lot of online sales that happened during the pandemic, there's still sales tax collected on those, even though perhaps bricks and mortar stores are places that you would normally have it. What did get discussed in the last legislative session, and there is an exemption for, is there was a bill introduced to totally get rid of the B&O tax for cities, all cities. And as you can see from your budget, what an impact that would have had. I believe in last year, if you had knocked out the B&O tax, if that bill had been successful, it would have been about 21 or 22% of the entire budget of the city. Fortunately, that bill did not get anywhere, but it did start with one exemption that does not affect this city since there are no car dealers within the city, but the new car sales will be exempt from B&O taxes. So if you are a city that has car dealers within your corporate limits, you're going to lose that revenue on new car sales, what the dealer would pay. The concern I think many cities have, and particularly the municipal league, is once you start taking little exemptions for certain things that would be exempted from B&O tax, does that then another category would ask for the same thing? So that is a concern going forward. And as I said, there was a bill introduced that would have wiped out the B&O tax for every city in every category, which would have had a very significant impact, not on just this city, but every city. So I think that it's important for people to understand that although everybody pays lots of taxes in different places to different governmental entities, these are your only sources of revenue, as Tracy indicated. And your primary are the three that she indicated. So it is important to be aware of what your legislature considers every year. And in between the sessions, it's important to talk to your representatives so they know what you see as the impact on every year when you try to do this budget, the limitations cities have, and how dependent you are on those for your revenue sources. You can't spend money that you don't have. That's just where it goes.
And I'll just kind of follow up. Thank goodness that bill didn't go any farther, or we would be looking at a budget cuts of $1.2, $1.3 million. And just kind of let that sink in a little bit of what services may be cut for the citizens.
And just to follow up on, this was not the first year it was introduced. It has been introduced previously. So just because it was unsuccessful this year does not mean it won't be reintroduced and reconsidered. So it's very important that people stay on top of that. I mean, huge impact for every municipality in the state.
Thanks, Jerry.
Okay, any other questions before moving on? Okay, so now we go down to the fines and forfeitures part of the revenues. So the first line item is fines, fees, and court costs. This is basically what runs through our municipal court. And keep in mind, and I was going to bring it with me and I don't have it, but there's a large portion of those fines do not come to the city. We are required to submit those to for different categories within the state. Then we have, so any of the, basically the department numbers or expenditure numbers that are 320 all have to do with the court system. Municipal court restitution, police equipment fees, that's $60. That gets allotted to the police department. Then you have the court admin fees, court tech and maintenance fees, traffic school, DUI state, DUI city, West Virginia Public Defender Service, code enforcement fines, bonds that are paid. Generally, the highest percentage of bonds that are paid get paid right back out at some point. And then you'll have penalties for late payments as well through the court system. Then you have parking violations. Parking violations as a street sweeper, and then parking penalties. We have the regional jail ops that we receive, and then business licenses. We are budgeting projected $28,000 for the upcoming budget year. We budgeted this current year $26,000 through December. It's $6,750. I am not a bit concerned about that because if our licenses are effective July 1st, so the middle of May, we send out the business license renewals, and the bulk of those payments come in June. So I'm not concerned about that amount at all. The business license penalties, and then the building permit fees, estimating for the upcoming year at $30,000. We've estimated, we've budgeted $25,000 this fiscal year, and we've received through December $12,715. Historically, we've received $27,000, almost $29,000, $25,000. Anybody have any questions about the fine and forfeitures?
I just wanted to make a comment about the municipal court fees. As council knows, but the public may not, we have a pending home rule application with the home rule board that includes 2 requests for us to be able to raise 2 different types of fees within municipal court. So it's an attempt to try to raise revenues to support the court, but we're waiting on an answer from them.
And I will say too, thank you, Jessica, I will also say that the ability to collect, as the counselor well knows, has really been taken away from the city to collect any of these things. We used to be able to suspend driver's licenses. That has helped, but correct me if I'm wrong, that is not allowed anymore, so we don't have that. And then the ability to collect that. We are having trouble because of state law finding any collection services that want to go after it due to, I think, the way certain laws or something like that. So,
What percentage of individuals typically pay?
I would say you're probably, I don't know,
It would be
A
very,
third?
10%.
It's about 30. When I did
Third-
this
is it
in preparation for that home rule application and looking at it, it
It's
came in
about
about 30%.
Yeah, so it's not a lot.
Thank you.
unfortunately.
And even if, as Tracy indicated, even if you're successful, the vast majority of court costs do not come to the city.
Right.
Because of all the other fees that it goes to. And the municipal court has two options. They can incarcerate a person for up to 30 days because all they handle are misdemeanors, which would cost the city almost a little less than $50 a day because you would pay the incarceration fee or fines. The vast majority of people are fined, but as everyone has indicated, the collection is the problem. You can fine people, but there are very few ways to force the collection. Can't even do it. What we used to be able to do is reach out if they got a tax refund, that part of that, if they owed a fine, could come to the city. That got taken away, so you can't do that either any longer.
And I will also say that they are allowed to do a payment plan. And that payment plan can be as much as $5 a month over 20 years. If they miss a payment, they can pay, that payment plan is null and void. They can pay $25 to start another payment plan for the same amount. So-
That got changed the same year
Yeah.
the law got changed with regard to the driver's licenses and with regard to not being able to put a lien on any tax refund. So, when you calculate, when the person says they can't make a full payment, the court's required to do this payment plan and spread it out depending on what their income is and depending on the fine for. It could be up to 15 years to pay it.
Yeah, we have some that go out to 20, but it's $5 a month.
Was there some question about increasing municipal communities to pay more for jailed individuals? Did that pass?
Well, they're always looking at that because the counties bear the biggest brunt of that because usually they have the pretrial detainees. They've looked at that. They were actually going to raise the fees. To be honest, I'm not certain exactly what did occur with regard to that, but that's something that gets looked at every year. And part of the reason the fee is what it is, it's used to pay the bond payments that finance the building of all those regional jails. So you need to make sure you have a revenue stream that will take care of that. But our regional jails are overpopulated. There are more people incarcerated in them than they're really built for, which is also a safety issue and an issue with regard to that. They're owed a bunch of money from some counties that just don't have the money to pay. When you're paying almost $50 a day and you have a pretrial detainee, it can get very expensive. But I can tell you that although there are people that are incarcerated by the municipal court, it is not as much as certainly it would be in any other, in the circuit court level or the magistrate court level.
And I believe that amount, after speaking with the judge, I think it's going to go up to 52 something
Yeah,
odd cents.
Yeah, they recalculated,
now.
I think, for the coming year.
So
Now,
it's going up a little bit?
yeah, yeah. So, it's around $50 or whatever. And the city would be responsible for anyone that's, sometimes when the police pick a person up, they are incarcerated for a day or two, depending on what the offense is and if they can make the bond and when the judge arraigns them. So you have that, but I was more or less talking about when someone's sentenced and to up to 30 days of incarceration for each offense.
There seems to be a concerted effort by the legislature to, I guess, hamstring the city's or municipalities' ability to raise revenue. Is that explained? I mean, is there a rational explanation for that?
No. And a simple answer, there really isn't. I mean, Municipal League has been fighting this for a while, and their stance, especially on the jails, was the state decided we're going to build regional jails, we're going to close the city and county jails, we're going to maintain them. Well, then they came back and said, well, now it's too expensive, we need money from you. So the Municipal League's been fighting that for quite some time.
I don't think a lot of people understand some basic civics about how the state works, how the county works, how cities work in West Virginia or anywhere for that matter. And it's really important to understand that because there is some misconception about, there's all this money out there. Well, and I pay all these taxes, but as I said earlier, you see where your revenues come from. And really, a city provides a lot of services that a city is required to provide. You've got fire departments, you've got police departments, you've got infrastructure that the city has to take care of, let alone all the employees to make all of that happen on a very, very limited areas that you can do anything. And your revenue stream is not going to substantially change. It's going to be pretty static most of the time, but those little bites of taking things away or making things more costly, as the mayor said, it's hard to explain sometimes. I really think it is.
Okay, no further questions. We'll go on to licenses and permits. We have the miscellaneous permits and variances. Generally are budgeted a very small amount. Projected budget for the upcoming year is $200. Then we have the franchise fees. We're budgeting $80,000. The current budget year, we budgeted $85,000. Through the end of December, we've received $39,675. Let's look at that historically. Back in 2019, we received almost $93,000. 2020, a little over $88,000. 2021, $85,000. So that is going backwards a little bit as well. And then you have the
Franchise fee? I'm sorry, what's a franchise fee? Where do those?
the Sudden Link.
And that's for cable only.
Only,
That does not include internet services,
Right.
only cable.
And then you have the IRP fees. This is basically a tax on commercial vehicles on the mileage driven in our jurisdiction. We are budgeting $54,000. Once again, if you take a look at historical numbers, we were almost at $92,000, $95,000, and then the drop again to $61,000. Current budget years, we budgeted $70,000, but through the end of December, we've received just a little over $29,000. So those revenues are down as well. Any questions regarding licenses and permits? And the franchise fees and the IRP fees, those come directly from the state to us. Okay, so total licensing, permits, things that fall in that, and fees. Municipal service fees, we're budgeting $1,000. That is basically any reconnect fees and return checks that we get. That's what falls into that. Rental agreement fees, vacant structure fees, inspection fees.
Why is that, we have not done any, this is for rental inspections?
Rental agreements, I don't know if,
There's no, we haven't collected any?
I don't think there's a fee
I don't-
with doing a rental inspection. There is one, but I don't believe there's a fee collected for it.
Wait, there is a fee, but we don't collect it, is that what?
Well, you could establish a fee. There is, I don't believe the city code provides for a fee for the rental inspections.
What's the money then that shows in the past, 1,200, 480, 6,200, what are those?
I would have to look at that and get back to
Okay.
you. I don't, yes, I don't have access to that. I don't know if, sorry, Mr. Hanson, I know that you're fairly new. I don't know if you would know. That would come from Mr. Eisner.
I'm not sure either.
Well, and there may not have been in that year rental
Right.
inspections. You don't have to do them every year. They're good for a period of time, so that may explain why it varies. I don't know.
Then you have the vacant structure fees, inspection fees, parking meter revenues, parking, and just the regular parking is the permit parking at Seneca Mall and Boswecco. And then you have rents, royalties, and concessions, PGCC, Phil Gaynor Community Rents. We're budgeting $25,000, the same as the current fiscal year. Through the end of December, the amount was $14,600. And once again, if you look at historical pre-COVID, they brought in almost $39,000, $36,500, and then it dropped once COVID hit down to 16, but they're doing much better this fiscal year and are on the upswing with that. Refuge collection, there's nothing budgeted in that. That was generally for special pickups. That whole process has been moved to sanitation, so that's being taken out of the budget now. And there's nothing for charges for services. We don't do anything with that. Any questions regarding any of those? Okay, then we have the intergovernmental, the federal grants, state grants, contributions from another fund, city hall charges to fire, parks, water, sewer, sanitation. That is basically what those funds pay the city to basically administer payroll, the fire fee billings, collections, accounts payable, those types of things. And that has been cut for the upcoming budget year as well as in this current budget year due to the restructuring of operations where they're only over general fund and sanitation and water or sewer are now strictly on their own, the administration part of that. And then the gaming income, excuse me.
May I ask a
payment-
question first?
Yes, you sure may.
Can you tell me what the payment in lieu of taxes is?
That's what, I was just going back to that because I started to skip over it, I'm sorry. So payment in lieu of taxes, we get that annually. We receive that from the Housing Authority in lieu of a tax that they would pay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Gaming income is table games, and it's the Greenbrier table games that we also get from the state. Property rehabilitation, there's nothing budgeted for that, but where we've used that in the past, if you recall, when there's been property demolished and the city owns that property, that's gone out for, to auction, and that would be what would fall into that line item. Anything regarding any of those?
So things like the grant for the trees and stuff like that, that would be under the state?
That would, yes, so the, yes, the West Virginia Division of Forestry is under the state, and the federal grant was the RCDI grant. Mhm. Okay. All right, then the miscellaneous revenue. So we have interest earned, that's interest earned on our general fund cash account. Reimbursements could be anything from, it's basically, the majority of it's fuel tax that we get reimbursed for. Refunds and rebates are generally the P-card rebates, and there was also one in this year for the, I'm not sure I'm saying this, so Travis, correct me if I'm wrong, like the police calendar rebate. It was a little over $800, I believe, that was sent back to the city for that. Sale of fixed asset, we don't budget anything there. Obviously, if we would sell something there, it would come back to that. That's out of the general fund. Insurance claims, if we have a vehicle insurance claim or something of that sort, I'm going to use the police department, sorry as an example, but let's say if one of their cruisers is damaged, we file a claim, the insurance pays the difference from our deductible, it'd be receipted into that line item. Filing fees are for the upcoming election. The accident reports are police accident reports where people request those, and so there is a charge for that. The recycling program, we get quarterly payments from the Randolph County Solid Waste Authority to help with that, the recycling program. Video lottery, we get those revenues from the state. Miscellaneous revenues basically can be anything from the rental of the sound system, anything that's taken to Elkins Iron and Metal, general fund wise, alley abandonment, just something that doesn't happen very often. It doesn't have its own category there. And then you have the Field Gainer Community Center donations, the police donations, and any tree board donations. Any questions regarding that?
Phil, the donations for the Phil Gaynor, I'm just,
You're wondering about that big one?
somebody donated that much money?
Yes, so that was part of getting the floor, the new floor. They had a, what's the word I wanted to
The
use?
Snowshoe, right, the Snowshoe Foundation made a grant.
Right,
And
several of the
others.
banks made a grant, yeah. So that was some fundraising they did to put toward that
Right,
new
thank you.
floor. So that brings us to a budgeted revenue, projected budgeted revenue of $5,110,670. Now, also you will realize, or may not have realized, the fire department is out of this because at the last council meeting, you agreed to move that to a new fund. Thank you very much. And so fire department is not at all in this budget. Okay?
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Judy, there was a line item earlier for rental at Phil Gaynor.
Yes, sir.
Now, does that money go into the general revenue, or is that reserved for Parks and Rec?
No, that's all general fund because the
thank
Phil
you.
Gaynor Center is under the general fund.
Thank
Yes, sir. Okay, any other questions before moving on to the expenditures? Oops. All righty, so we're going to start with the mayor's budget. Jessica, do you want to speak to that? I guess we'll each speak to our individual budgets and,
So the couple notable things, do you want me to go line by line for each one of them? So officials, under personal services, you have the mayor's salary. That's stayed the same for several years. Well, it's increased to previous years because of an adjustment that the previous mayor had made. So it's $20,000. Under salary and wages, that is zeroed out because the executive secretary, who had been under the mayor's department as far as budgeting, has been moved over to the clerk's department. So you'll see a pretty big reduction overall in personal services, just over $38,000, because anything associated with that position, salary, wages, taxes, benefits, has all been moved over to the clerk's budget. So the only thing left budgeted for the mayor is the salary and the associated FICA expenses. Moving down to contractual services, you have telephone expenses, that's cell phone and I believe hotspot. No printing, we haven't budgeted anything for printing for a long time. Travel is at $1,500, and travel, of course, is for hotel, gas reimbursement, food, not any registration fees or things like that you'll find under training and education. So $1,500 for travel, nothing for advertising, $1,000 for training and education, $2,200 for dues and subscriptions. That includes things like membership with the Municipal League, membership with the Chamber of Commerce. I believe the Civil War signs are budgeted under there, or $200. And that also includes subscriptions to the Intermountain and the State Journal. I think that's just about everything. No professional services, insurance and bonds budgeted for $24. Not really.
life insurance.
What's that?
Life insurance.
Life insurance, okay. And then contracted services have been removed. Again, that's associated with the executive secretary. That has to do with the multi-function machine, the fax copier scanner machine. So all those expenses have been moved over to the clerk's budget. And then a reduction in supplies and materials, again, because of the move associated with the executive secretary. So this budget in total is being reduced by almost $41,000.
And if I can add to that, if you look historically, we were budgeting certain percentages the prior 3 fiscal years. That has changed now, so we're budgeting full amounts and then having those funds pay into that. So that's why the numbers look a little off. And I will also say, if you see official salary and then you see salary and wages as you go through, an official salary is anybody elected into a position. That's the difference between those.
Any questions about that one?
Okay, then we have the council budget.
Council budget hasn't changed too much. There is a slight increase you'll see in group health insurance. The salaries remained the same. I believe that FICA has remained the same. As I said, slight increase in insurance, and retirement is basically the same, just $40 less. So overall, for personal services, there's an increase of just under $1,200. For contractual services, the previous amounts that you see in the current budget and the 2021 budget were associated with the tablets, and so we've gotten rid of those, so that's been completely eliminated. We don't have a need to budget anything in that line item for this fiscal year. Travel is set at $1,000, training and education, $750, and you'll see those are both increases because over COVID, no one was traveling, so we weren't budgeting anything at least the last fiscal year. Contracted services, $5,000 is in there, and that is for the purpose of the strategic plan, developing a new strategic plan, having, whether that's a facilitator or moderator, to come in and assist with that. We expect to do that either later this year or in the spring of next year, so sometime during fiscal year 23. So that's where the main increase comes from. And then supplies and materials, that is also associated with the strategic planning if we need anything for that project. So increase to the overall council budget of $4,854.
I kind of hate stepping into this, but group health insurance. I understand that the council has a choice, is that correct, between taking insurance? I don't understand it, and I know that I was on council when this happened, but I really would like to understand it better and see if we can't fix this somehow. I mean, I just think somehow there is some confusion about the insurance, in lieu of your monthly payment. Can you help me with that?
Well, I don't know what year it
it's been a
was,
few
but
years ago that happened. and-
yes, and whatever we offer any other employee has to be offered the same option. We can't change a certain amount that somebody contributes any different to what everybody else contributes. So
Yeah, there's an
Not sure.
ordinance in place that was adopted, I don't remember the year, it was prior to me arriving, that gives
Probably-
council the option of receiving a salary, $600 a month, or being enrolled in insurance. And that, as Tracy mentioned, the insurance it's completely dependent on the counselor's circumstances. They're single, with a spouse and dependents, and so then any program that's offered to any other employee has to then be offered to that council person. You can't restrict the payment of, health insurance versus any other employee. But if you want to make a change to that, that requires an ordinance to do so.
Yeah, I think it needs to be looked at for sure.
Well, that could be something you could refer to your Rules and Ordinance Committee if you want. I mean, it was put in place probably in 16 or 17 maybe, I'm not sure the year. But it was passed unanimously is my recollection, and gave council the option to take either your monthly salary payment or the insurance, because council members are considered employees of the city. So that opened up the insurance to them, just like any other employee of the city.
Thank you.
all right, if no other questions regarding council, we'll come down to the treasurer's office. So we have the salary and wages budgeted $199,000. That includes, we have the treasurer, the deputy treasurer, 2 accounting clerk positions, a payroll position, and 2 utility billing clerks that have 25% of their wages and the things that go with that out of the treasurer's budget as well. Then you have the FICA expense increase due to the wage increases. Group health insurance, it's increasing by roughly $7,000. I have an opening, and I have no idea what that person is going to take, so I always budget the highest number for the insurance cost. Retirement's going up about $300. Overtime, estimated at $840. I technically don't have a lot of people get paid for overtime because they opt for comp time to use at a later time. Travel, that would be mileage basically to any trainings at $100. Maintenance of equipment, $500. Postage for the treasurer's office is at $6,000. That postage amount usually includes the billings for business licenses, B&Os, which are quarterly and annuals, and any miscellaneous things that need to be sent out from our office, such as any letters to the county clerk, to customers for a variety of things. Then you have advertising. I've put 200 in there just in case we need to, like currently we're advertising for bids for the general liability insurance. Training and education is $500. Dues and subscriptions are $300. That's basically the subscribing to Adobe to allow for the exporting of files, and we subscribe to White Pages to try to find people who may owe the city some money. So we use that. That has come in quite handy. Nothing for professional services, nothing for insurance and bonds. Court costs and damages, $200. Contracted services, that is where we are contracting with Datamax for the businesses' fines and the collections. That's the main bulk of that. You just never know what they're going to come up with. So if you look at the history of that, back in 2019, we paid them almost $57,000. That was for the businesses they found. So basically, they received 57, the city received 57,000. And then as they worked through it, it's down to 42,000, 14,000. Through December, it was just about 5,800, but I can tell you in February, I believe it was, we received a bill for $9,000, or we paid them $9,000, so they found $18,000 more in revenue for us. And we don't pay them until we receive the money. So just, it's not a pay-ahead service. Refunds, reimbursements, there's nothing budgeted there. Supplies and materials. Looking at, we've had to replace a couple PCs this year because they are fairly old. Probably looking at more of that to happen, so just basically that's why that is staying at the current level it's at. So the overall budget for the treasurer's office is $325,940, is about an increase of $33,000. Anybody have any?
Just a clarification, mostly on contracted services. So
Yes.
the 20,000 is not what we've received, but what's expected, is that correct?
No, the 20,000 is what we are expected to pay out.
To pay
Yes.
out,
Mhm.
okay.
Yes, ma'am. Any other questions? Okay, we'll go, oh my gosh, sorry. Go to the city clerk.
So, one of the biggest changes, obviously, is the addition of the executive secretary and all the associated expenses I talked about being removed from the mayor's budget. You'll notice that the increase in salary and wages is less than what is actually being removed from the mayor's budget. The reason for that is because of the reduction in hours of the executive secretary. So she's working around 25 hours a week, which is working out great. So we're not budgeting as much as as I had to the previous year when we were just hiring into that position. So there's an increase, of course, in the wages, and that also some of that associated increase has to do with an increase in salaries, wages for employees as well, that we looked through the compensation study and made adjustments there. Increase in associated expenses, FICA, group health insurance, retirement, so a total increase in personal services of $43,374. For contractual services, that's staying the same, and that is a cell phone for myself. Increase in travel, bumping that back up a little bit, both because I expect to travel more in the next fiscal year than I did in the past 2 years, and the addition of the executive secretary too. And that includes myself, the executive secretary, and our external affairs specialist are all included in this budget. Nothing for postage or maintenance of equipment or postage. A little bit for advertising. We don't have to use that very often, but if we need to put out an RFP or an RFQ or something like that, I like to keep a little bit in there just in case. I don't think we haven't used anything so far this year to date. Training and education, increasing that again, both in response to expectation that we'll be traveling more, enrolling in more educational opportunities, both myself and my 2 employees. Dues and subscriptions is at $4,000, and that includes quite a few things. Let me find my list so I don't leave anything out. We have our website hosting. This is a Rotary annual dues, membership to the West Virginia Municipal Clerks Association, it's only $35 a year, State Journal, ESRI, which is the GIS system, which I have to maintain on my computer for the purpose of addressing, our subscription to Zoom, which we continue to maintain, MailChimp, which is a service that we use for messaging, Bitly, which has to do with being able to create website addresses, shorter website addresses that they're easily shared and can be attached to documents and things like that, easier for the public to access. And let's see, our Microsoft licensing and Adobe Pro for the 3 of us for multiple devices. That's about it for dues and subscriptions. So that's why there's a significant amount budgeted there. Under contracted services, I think, did you make the adjustment on here from, okay. So I think what you see is 46,000. That has been reduced. As of yesterday, I was able to confirm with American Legal Publishing, who does our codification, that we can reduce the number of printed updates we receive for the code books. If you recall, when we first partnered with them, contracted with them, we had 16 code books, city code books. One for all the council members, the mayor, and the 5 administrative officers. It's fairly costly. Everything online is updated. You know, we have subscription costs associated with that. But whenever they would do paper updates, which we would do annually, those have proven to be pretty pricey. And as we look at a zoning ordinance that is about 100 pages long, it's a significant cost. So I was able to confirm with them, because in our contract it required that that stayed the same for 5 years. We're still in that 5-year period, but they're willing to let us cut down the number of printed copies. So we're reducing that to 6, and that cut $22,000 out of that line item. So that is down to $24,000. So the total for contracted services is actually a reduction of $7,750. Supplies and materials at $3,000, that's an increase, both for some, we're also looking forward to probably having to replace some equipment over this next year, and just the inclusion of the executive secretary in that budget as well. So overall, the budget comes in at $202,122. and that is an increase of $37,624. Any questions?
Okay, next you have municipal court. So you have salary and wages, this would be for the judge and the court clerk, the FICA expense, group health insurance, retirement, overtime, telephone for the court clerk. For travel, they attend a training usually end of October, early November in Charleston. The judge and the court clerk both attend those trainings. Dues and subscriptions, professional services would be for any attorney fees related to that. Contracted services, remittance fee collected, refunds, reimbursements, supplies and materials. I don't see where the judge had put anything into computer software. We'll have to take a look at that. There should be some licensing required to that, but we could move some funds around. But that's what the judge has turned in for his department.
Are professional services, attorney services, relative to municipal court?
Yes, yes, municipal court only, yes, sir. Any other questions regarding municipal court? And you see the total for that budget is $148,306. Okay, then the next line item is Main Street. What I currently have in that budget is what was submitted. So these are, like I said, this is a live working document. As I just change the city clerk's one line item, these things can change as we get through, go through the budget as well. So that Main Street was budgeted at $5,000 initially. Then you have the authorities and entities. You have Randolph Tucker Child Advocacy budgeted at $3,000, the Cump House at $2,500, Randolph County Chamber of Commerce at $2,500, Appalachian Forest Heritage at $2,000, the Tree Board at $2,000, Randolph County Arts Council at $3,000, and the Randolph County Development Authority at $5,000, for a total there of $20,000. Then we have budgeted for demolition at $50,000. And this is one area as we go on, I think that we can make a change. Then you have the custodial budget. Mr. Sampson, please.
So for custodial, salary and wages, we went from 56,000 budgeted last year to 60,000. FICA expenses, 46 to 48, 4,600 to 4,800. Group health insurance stayed at 22.5. Retirement stayed at 5,800. Overtime extra help stayed at 5,000. Telephone went up $200 from 600 to 800. Maintenance of buildings and grounds went from 12,000 to 0. The reason we did that was we had two separate budgets, one for City Hall and one for custodial for maintenance of buildings and grounds. We combined that to just have one budget because there was no sense in having two separate budgets out there, so we saved $12,000 on that part. Maintenance of equipment, it was budgeted at $8,000, we kept it at $8,000. Contracted services, $1,600, we kept it at $1,600. Supplies and materials, we kept it at $4,200 as it was last year. Automobile supplies, we kept it at $1,200 as it was last year. Uniforms, $1,200 as well as it was last year. And then capital outlay is $11,000 as it was last year, for a total of $126,100. So we actually went down in budget for this year.
Can you describe for me what is covered under maintenance of buildings and grounds?
So maintenance of buildings and grounds is the maintenance of of what happens here at City Hall. So that's no longer, like I said, included in custodial. It's going to be the upkeep of all the buildings here at City Hall, the maintenance of the grounds. That doesn't include the beautification part of it, but it includes grass cutting, snow removal, and all that good stuff.
Buildings, would we not be classifying Darden House and the Cump House in this line item?
I don't know that we've ever.
I know that we haven't, but shouldn't we? I mean, the Cump House is building that belongs to the city as well as the Darden House, and I think they've always been treated as an outside entity, but they're not really.
I mean, that's.
I'm just throwing that out to think about, because we should probably think about it as an inclusion. Yeah, thank you, Jerry.
Well, what I was going to say is there's two things about the Cump House. The property itself is owned by the city, but the Cump Education Center is a separate entity. So even though the city owns the property, the Cump Education Center is a nonprofit that runs its own programs and things. So there's really two things there.
Right, but I'm just looking at the word buildings. and
Right,
grounds.
right.
That's
Yeah,
all.
just so people, I mean, I believe there's money allotted to the Cump Education Center. Am I correct about that?
They're usually given an
Right.
annual amount,
But,
yes.
but the building, the grounds are the city's, they own it.
Should be, there's built to the city's
The
responsibility.
city owns it,
Okay.
just
so-
like it owns this building and other buildings in the
Yeah,
city.
so, I mean, I think we should start looking at it as a whole instead of segmenting out. Because, I mean, they do have maintenance, the Darden House has maintenance, you have to mow the grass, you have to take care of the plants. Same with City Hall, same with the Cump House. So, I mean, I'm just trying to look at maintenance of buildings and grounds, nothing else.
So with that said, then I think more discussion needs to go into that, because then you're looking at some department doing that work.
Correct.
So right now, we have zero, is that, am I reading this correctly?
We have zero for the custodial budget. Now we have a City Hall budget of maintenance of buildings and grounds as well.
You'll
That-
see that as we get further along.
Yeah.
There used to be a line item in custodial, maintenance of buildings and grounds, as well as City Hall. They kind of duplicated each other, so we just moved it all into City Hall, maintenance of buildings and grounds.
Ms. Judy, I have a question as well.
Yes, sir.
Can you, or maybe Josh, what is the contracted services comprised of?
You know, I'm uncertain of that. I haven't looked at a detailed report of the contracted services. I have looked over the past years though, and we haven't used it, that much of it. So it would go into rollover at that point, but I'm not 100% certain. So people maybe before me might be able to answer to it.
Yeah, I can help. Generally, that is for the elevator inspection, the company that comes in for that.
Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome.
Judy, in general, with the automotive supplies throughout, is that the gas and oil and tires and stuff
Yes,
for all, okay?
yes, sir.
thank you.
Plus any other, parts that would
They would need,
need
thank you very much.
carburetors. Mhm. Okay, anything else on custodial? Okay, then we're looking at Region 7, $8,158. That's kind of been the norm the last couple of years.
And what is that used for? Is that like membership or what is that?
You're required.
Yeah,
That's required by state law,
It's a
right?
requirement by state law.
yeah.
Every county within that region pays a fee
Yeah, that's
for
And-
each region throughout the state.
And they've been very instrumental, especially with water and sewer as well. All right, then you have the building inspector.
For building inspector, salary and wages went up. It went from 49,000 to 66,250. The reason we did that was we added the position that the RCDI grant included from the last city council meeting. That's their salary, their office supplies. That's how we lumped it in for now. We'll be able to separate that out better once that position gets filled and moved on forward from there. FICA went up to $4,000 from $3,200. Group health insurance, $4,200 and stayed at $4,200. Retirement stayed at $5,000. Telephone went up to $1,000 from $375. Phil has added an iPad, a computer to his software setup, just to let him do his job more capable out in the field, so he can access his documents from out in the field versus taking it all versus paper copies. Printing, we budgeted for $450 versus the $425. Travel, we're staying at $800. Maintenance of equipment is $750 last year. We went up to $800 this year. Maintenance of autos and trucks, we went from where we stayed at $500. Postage, we're doing $0. So that actually went down from $400. Advertising, we're staying at $300. Training and education, we went up $300 from $3,200 to $3,500. Dues and subscriptions, we went up $200 from $1,600 to $1,800. Professional services, we stayed at $800. Insurance and bonds, we calculated $0. Contracted services, we stayed at $800. Refunds and reimbursements is still at $0. Supplies and materials, we stayed at $4,000. Automobile supplies, we stayed at $1,200. Uniforms, we stayed at $700. And capital outlay equipment, we stayed at $6,000 for a total of $102,100. Any questions on that?
Quick question, we have a line item on maintenance of auto and trucks, and we have a line item on automobile supplies. Can those be combined?
It's a good question. Tracy, can you elaborate on that?
We can actually eliminate the maintenance of autos and trucks out of the building inspector. We could eliminate that. Well, do you want to move that 500 down to automobile supplies? Since there's only one vehicle in there, unless we get to a point with the new position that may require, you might want to just
I don't
leave
think that
it
would
in
happen in this
this
fiscal
fiscal
year.
year.
Is that a enterprise vehicle?
No, it is not. That will be paid off in April, I believe. His monthly payment will be paid off in April.
And just to clarify that real quick, that vehicle was bought before we started the enterprise
Yes, sir.
program.
Yes, sir. And let me just kind of throw out, in case anybody's wondering, like, why isn't anybody budgeting postage? In the majority of, we used to separate it by department, and it got a little overwhelming in my office. So for the majority of the departments within City Hall, it's going to show up under City Hall postage. So I don't want somebody to look and see $9 of postage. Is that all the building inspector's been doing? So just kind of want you to understand that the postage costs are just kind of going under City Hall right now. Any questions regarding the building inspector? Okay, planning and zoning.
That is me, and so this relates to the Planning Commission. We had budgeted this year $300 for advertising and $200 for supplies and material, and that is related to the planning, the ordinance that is going to be recommended to council. We're required to have public hearings, but it's been really important to the Planning Commission, and I believe to council as well, to make sure that we have some other public opportunities. We had the open house, remember when that was, back over at the Phil Gaynor Center before, and those things have been very helpful and informative. So there's a small amount of money budgeted. I'm not sure how this is all going to fall, so there's still money left in this fiscal year's budget, but just in case we rolled over into next fiscal year and needed to have some even if that's after the passing of the ordinance, needed to have some public meetings for educational purposes. I wanted to leave a little bit budgeted in there for that reason. Total reduction of $100, the budget is $400 requested for fiscal year '23.
Okay, no questions, and we'll move down to elections.
Elections, so I reduced the printing cost a little bit because if you remember, the ballots that we had to have printed for the last election included the charter change and were longer, larger, required more printing than what we had done in previous years. So I've gone back to budgeting about $3,000. If you look, can you see back to from 2018, fiscal year 19, of course this is every other year, so you're gonna see the zeros every other year, the printing was at just over 2,300, but in fiscal year 21, it was at almost 3,900, so I split the difference there and said 3,000, because we've seen an increase in paper products recently too, so just kind of trying to hit the middle ground there with that. Advertising is for the same reason. I've reduced it from the fiscal year 21 because the advertisement should not be as large, shouldn't cost quite as much. For contracted services, there's a slight increase up to $10,000, and that is payment to all the election officials. And then again, a reduction in supplies and materials. Don't really have to use this very often. I have lots of supplies that have built up over the years as far as what they require, but it does pop up that we need things like locks or tape or pens or just various things that require that for elections. So there's a small amount of money budgeted there. So overall, the budget is $14,300 and an increase of $862.
Any questions? Okay, then we come to City Hall. So telephone is budgeted at $1,800. That's for the Ethernet. Printing, we don't have anything budgeted in that. Prior, we've had the welcome booklets, which I will say have been received extremely well by new customers. They're handed out when they're signing up for utility services. Utilities, we're budgeting $35,000. That's obviously for electric, gas, water, sewer, garbage. Maintenance of buildings and grounds, as Mr. Sampson had mentioned, these are have been combined, so that can be basically for any work done within City Hall or to the outside area. Maintenance of equipment, the $5,200 is the postage machine lease. Postage for $2,500, that would include the majority of City Hall departments. Advertising is at $5,500. That can be anywhere from any type of bids that would go out, public hearings, closings, holiday closings, a variety of things there. Dues and subscriptions, web hosting, music licenses. Professional services of $85,000 are city attorney fees. The audit cost at $15,000, it's what we budgeted for this current year and next year, as we were able to do a 2-year contract for our annual audits. The insurance and bonds, the general liability, property insurance, I'm estimating at $115,000. That is an increase of about $25,000. I'm err on the side of caution. It is currently out for bids, and the bids are due in on April the 15th. So we'll have a better idea once those bids come in and look over those of really what we're going to have. And then the insurance and bonds for workers' comp, it's increasing by $2,000 due to potentially an increase in wages. Contracted services at $125,000. This is for the online payment service through Payment Service Network, our contract with the Line HR, any servers, the labor, mat rentals for the city, telecom, those types of things.
Tracy, I'm sorry to interrupt, but did you get my message about the payments to LMC? So that's we contract with them for maintenance of our website, and that's moved into my budget. I think it was, I just didn't know if that had been reduced in that budget to
I'm not
reflect that.
sure it hasn't been reduced.
I think it was $14.30 for the year.
That's not part of the email hosting either on
No,
that.
no, it's not.
I'm hesitant to reduce it if you look at historical numbers.
Oh, I'm just wanted
yeah.
to make sure you'd seen
Yeah.
that and maybe taken that into account. It's not that
Yeah.
much money. I don't think it'll make that big of a difference.
Right, and if you look at historically, we've had 144,000, 114, 217. We budgeted 100,000 for contracted services this year, and through the end of December, the first 6 months, we're at roughly 68,000. So that's how I kind of came up with the 125. Supplies and materials, and then computer software. The 10,000 for computer software, this is an amount that we pay for our Encode software that is split over 4 funds. So the maintenance, regular daily updates, to handle all of that is just under $40,000 a year.
May I mention something, Tracy?
Yes, ma'am.
In the contracted services, I know right now it's available for online payment for utility bills, but as of next March, about a year from now, the city's going to be required to take any kind of payment for whatever, a building permit, any fines or whatever. State law that got passed last year makes that for all political subdivisions to have to do that. So
Yes.
I guess you'll have to figure out if that'll be who you'll use or however you'll do that. So that would be an increased fee
Yes.
of
Yes.
some amount. And I looked at the legislation, it doesn't say you can't pass it along, the fee that would go with it for the ultimate person that uses it. I'm sure there's some regulations they're working on since you have about a year to get to that. But that will be something that the city's going to be required by law to do.
Right. And I think I had mentioned in a previous council meeting, I've reached out to the state contact, and I have not heard a response back, so we'll continue to.
And the last time I looked,
Contacting him.
they're working on regs about it, so.
Yeah. All right, so any questions regarding City Hall? Okay, so the next thing you have is transfer to other funds. This would be amounts that would be transferred typically into the financial stabilization account or to the project account, the City Hall parking project account, if need be.
So is this indicating there will be no money put into financial stabilization this year?
That we won't know until July, till we know what our carryover amount is. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, then we have Public Works, Mr. Sampson.
Before I start Public Works, as far as the rental inspections and fees earlier that we spoke about, I reached out to Phil, and he said that there are costs for rental inspections. They're $30 a unit. Up to 5 over 5, there is $150 for that fee. But COVID has stopped the rental inspections except for building permit related inspections. The building permit cost covers the inspections except for the electrical service inspections, and they are $50. So COVID's kind of stopped the rentals. That's why it's went down over the past 2 or 3 years. I wanted to elaborate on that. For Public Works, salary and wages, we stated $134,000 for this requested budget. FICA, group health, and retirement all stayed the same. Overtime did go up by 1,000. Telephone went from 1,000 to 1,500. We was currently over budget the past 2 years on that, so I bumped it up to 1,500. Travel went from 600 to 800. Maintenance of autos and trucks stayed at 500. Postage went down to 0. Advertising went from 250, or stayed at 250, I'm sorry. Training and education went from 800 to 1,000. The reason we're doing that is because we're getting all of our supervisors computer education, Excel training, and that kind of stays in that budget. We're planning on doing more of that throughout the year. Dues and subscriptions is 0. Insurance and bonds is 0. Contracted services, we stayed at $4,000 for the budget. Supplies and materials, we bumped it up to $5,000 from $4,000, just due to the increased cost of paper and other supplies that we use. Automobile supplies, we kept it at $1,000. And then capital outlay equipment, we kept it at $7,000. Any questions on that?
What is your contracted services in that regard of Public Works?
I'm going to guess that's probably, is that Hart by chance for our copy machine and whatnot?
It could be for the copier contract.
Sorry, I can't answer that to the, it's.
Any other questions for Public Works? Okay. We'll go down to parking meters. Travis, do you want me to kind of respond to that? Okay. So we have budgeted $500. Really haven't had much for maintenance of equipment and supplies and materials due to taking the majority of parking meters out. So it's very minimal. Then we have contingencies. We don't budget anything in contingencies, excuse me. And then we have the police department.
All right, starting at the top with salary and wages, that is the majority of the increase in my entire budget. You'll see that it goes up. I believe it was an increase of $57,000 over last year. That factors in the standard one-step increase, and then also factors in the salary adjustments that we made for employees going forward. Everything below that, including insurance, FICA, all of those items went up in relation to the increase in health insurance as well as the increase in salaries. Oh, I'm blinking there. Moving down, telephone, we increased it by $1,500 to cover our historical expense that we're usually seeing with that, so there's an increase there. Printing, we threw $200 in there. We haven't used that, but I'm planning on using that this year in a recruitment effort. We're going to try to do some different things recruiting officer-wise this year. Moving on down, maintenance of equipment, staying the same at $5,000. Maintenance of autos and trucks, we did drop it another $5,000 this year. This is the line item, and we could probably combine these as well in our budget with the automobile supplies. I've kind of kept these different because this is kind of the way that I'm tracking the difference that we made by going with the enterprise vehicles. If you look all the way back to, is that 18 or 19, the first one?
Yes, 19. Oh, sorry.
That line item was at $54,335. We took it down last year to $20,000 with the difference in not having to take our vehicles to the garage and stuff as much. And I'm comfortable with cutting it another $5,000 this year just to help increase those savings some more. Postage, same thing, we didn't do anything there. Advertising, I did raise to $3,000, and again, this is our recruiting, and it's not just ours, it's every law enforcement agency. Something has to change. We're not getting the applicants to test and not getting the candidates that we need to fill our roster positions. So we're taking a long, hard look at how we're advertising our recruiting to test, and hopefully we'll see a difference in that this spring and summer when we get a test again. Training and education, $20,000, that's the same as last year. You'll see a sharp increase in that the last 2 years as compared to before. And that's honestly a couple of different things. One of them, it's my philosophy on training, that the training we give our officers needs to be top-notch, and it needs to be continuous, and we need to be putting guys out on the street that are prepared to do the job. The other portion of that is look at the prices of ammunition right now, and that comes out of that portion of the budget. It's tripled what it was 2 years ago. Moving on down, dues and subscriptions, there's $1,000 in that. That covers FOP dues for everybody, chiefs of police dues, and National Tactical Officers Association dues. Professional services at $10,000, that's staying the same. That's what we run out of that is anytime we have to do psychological evaluations, anytime we have to do polygraph services, things like that fall under professional, as well as if we have any critical incident debriefing, therapist costs, things like that, all come out of that line item. Where am I down to? Insurance and bonds, this is 300. Contracted services staying at 25,000. Again, that's our copier, that's our IT, everything like that. We didn't use as much this year as what we historically have, but that's because we replaced a lot of items the year before. I expect this year to have some computers and things. That's what we run ours through. If we get a new laptop or something, it goes through our contracted services through IT and it comes out of that line item. Insurance, there's nothing in it. Refunds and reimbursements, nothing in it. Supplies and materials, 35,000. Again, this is pretty much everything that runs the police department comes out of supplies and materials, from ordering citations to everything else. Brings us down to tactical supplies and materials. It's staying the same at 20,000. We do have some ammunition costs that come out of this line item as well if they pertain directly to the tactical team. Also, any chemical munitions, supplies, anything like that comes out of that line item. Automobile expenses staying the same at 30,000. Again, that number is also down from what we've had in years past as well. We were able to lower it last year. It had previously been 41 and then 39 and 47, so we've seen pretty good savings on that. I'm leaving it up there because we still have some items that we have not received on the 4 newest vehicles yet, those being brush guards and spotlights. So I'm expecting those to come out of that as well, and I don't have an exact price on what they're going to be just yet. Uniforms, it's staying the same at 20,000. Computer software, 6,500, it's staying the same. And our capital outlay equipment has gone up just a little bit, and that again is the lease payments on all of our enterprise vehicles.
And I will add to this, and I'm sure the chief has mentioned this in the previous meeting, but with these new leases, that will, I think you'll see a reduction in the expenditures he had from autos. He was having a lot of equipment problems with your vehicles.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, that decision, you're not going to see the full benefits of that transition for 5 years. In 5 years, you will really see it. When we flipped all the vehicles that we have right now, I believe we ended up with $60,000 worth of equity out of everything that we had on our lot, all of our used vehicles. We had about $60,000 worth of equity. When these 15 vehicles reach the end of their lease, 11 of them are going to have $10,000 worth of equity, and 4 of them are going to have $15,500 worth of equity. So in 5 years, when we do this whole thing again, instead of having $60,000 going toward those vehicles and what the payment ended up there, we're going to have a couple $100,000 going toward the new ones, and the payment's going to come way down. So while it does already look good on the numbers with the maintenance and stuff, the full benefits of this won't be seen for another 4 or 5 years. Then you'll really start seeing the savings.
Can you explain the decrease of insurance and bonds for me?
I can do
Tracy.
that.
Okay.
That's all put under City Hall now.
Okay.
Any other questions for the police department? Okay, we'll scroll down to the police admin.
You'll see an additional amount under salary and wages from the previous year. That is the only addition, is just raising the salary and wages for the 2 employees that fall under that budget.
Any questions there? Okay, then we'll go down to the Dog Warden Humane Society. The amount budgeted is $5,000 for the contribution. We don't have anything in supplies and materials, but that's generally disposal of animal carcass if the city is asked to do so. Any questions there? Okay, the flood control. We currently have budgeted in this budget year $25,000. We spent $23,604. We are budgeting $50,000 for next year because of increased costs that are anticipated. I don't know if anybody wants to fill in on that.
Well, that you are going to have an inspection this coming year they do it a total inspection every 5 years, I believe, and perhaps Josh can
That's correct.
speak more to it. So you already had a yearly inspection done last summer, and there are certain things that were pointed out that I'm sure Josh is going to be able to speak to, but you can't imagine that it's not going to cost some money to take care of the things that the city's responsible for as the sponsor of that project.
So my serious concerns, we increased that by 25,000. I am really worried that 50,000 is not even going to touch the things that it's going to take to bring flood control back to good status. Without saying that, many things was neglected over the past so many years that it really needs a lot of work to bring it up to in good standing status. We're like Jerry had said, we're going to have an inspection in May. That'll really tell us where our deficiencies are, but 50,000, it might have to be a staged project on flood control. It's not going to happen all at once, but there's going to be some major repairs happening over there, so.
Okay, and then we have 0 for pass-through grants. Then we have the street department.
So for streets, salary and wages went from 259,000 to 261,000. That was just from the wage increases. And then the FICA group health and retirement followed suit. Overtime extra help, it stayed at 37,000. The telephone stayed at 2,500. Utilities stayed at 120,000. Travel went up by $500. The reason we upped that is we're thinking about going and getting some of our supplies versus incurring these freight charges that's happening right now. We're going to pay half as much than what they're charging to go get paint or other supplies to do what we need to do here in the city. Maintenance of building and grounds, it's staying at $4,500. Maintenance of equipment went up from 25,000 to 30,000. The reason the increase on that is they're looking to maintain a couple of their older pieces of equipment. We're looking into buying currently a new backhoe, but they have a couple other pieces of equipment that really needs worked on, and the prices has only went up on that. So, maintenance of autos and trucks stayed at 20,000. Postage is 0. Buildings, equipment, and rentals is staying at 24,000. Advertising is 0. Training and education, we're keeping it at 500. Dues and subscriptions is 0. Professional services went up $200. I think that was just an increase for our yearly increase. Insurance and bonds, 0. Contracted services went from 61 to 71,000. That $10,000 increase is going to be the installation of 5 new drain basins throughout the city. They're contracting that out. Insurance premium for retirees went up to $3,000 because we've had one new retired person just happened last week. Supplies and materials went from 21,000 to 25,000. That's just the increase of supplies that's happened over the year. Paving went from 100,000 to 200,000. So after the increase that we've had from the stabilization fund this year, I think we'll be able to to stabilize that at 200,000 for at least the next year. That'll allow us to get our streets back to where we need to be. We're catching up on some of them with this transfer from the stabilization fund. I think we're gaining about 24 to 25 new streets, sections of streets paved versus 8 that was originally proposed under the $100,000 budget. So I think with that $200,000, we're going to gain about 15 to 16 streets versus the 8. So and then, of course, with the increase in paving is going to double the grinding. It's going from 15 to 30,000. Patching is going from 15,000 to 20,000. Grading will be 10,000. It stays the same. Automobile supplies is staying the same at 30,000. Uniforms is staying the same at 9,000. Capital outlay buildings is going from 5,000 to 21,000. So this is probably a part that could be cut. Now that I've learned a little bit more, they wanted to add a wash bay onto the backside of the streets department, but with new knowledge of the new sanitation garage, they're wanting to incorporate a wash bay into the sanitation garage that could be used citywide. So honestly, that could be cut. So that's one part that could be cut back.
And about how much would that cut?
I would like to take it back to the 5,000 that they had budgeted previously.
Do you want me to make that change?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Capital outlay improvements is stayed at 12,000, and capital outlay equipment is stayed at 112,630.
So if I can just add one thing, where it has buildings, equipments, and rents, that is, the Baxter Street Garage is split between the street department, central garage, and water distribution. And that is a bond payment that will be paid off 2026, but that's the portion that the street department pays toward that. And it's all based off of square footage is how the payments have been calculated.
Any questions on the streets budget?
On the utilities line, what constitutes utilities for you all?
That would be water, sewer, gas, electric.
Power and all that?
Any other questions for that? Okay, then we're to signs and signals.
Signs and signals, we're keeping it at $8,000 for the utilities portion of that. The maintenance of equipment, we're upping it from 1,500 to 2,000 as we did in the streets. And then the supplies and materials, we're increasing that from 15,000 to 20,000. That is due to the increase of paint, but we're talking about including that into the streets budget next, or possibly this year coming. Just for the fact that we feel like that paint should live in the streets budget, so.
Any questions regarding that? So do we want to move a portion of that money back up to the street department?
We can if you'd like.
How much would you like to move? Do you want to move? You want to move 5 or 10,000?
Yeah, let's move it back to 15.
Okay. Okay, then we have winterization,
Supplies and materials, it stayed at 25,000.
and that's basically your salt
That's correct.
for the snow. All right, and then we have central garage.
For salary and wages, we saw the wage compensation increase from 64,000 to 70,000. FICA group and retirement followed suit. The overtime and extra help stayed at 8,000. Telephone, it stayed at 3,000. Utilities, it stayed at 7,200. Maintenance of equipment went up $500. Maintenance of autos and trucks went up $800 to $2,000. Buildings, equipments, and rents, that's as Tracy was talking about earlier, as far as the building that they use down on Baxter. Insurance and bonds was $1,600, it stayed the same. Contracted services, it's staying the same at $800. Zero for insurance premium for retirees. Supplies and materials, it's staying at $5,200. Automobile supplies increased from $4,000 to $8,000. Uniforms is staying the same at $1,200. Capital outlay equipment increased from $19,000 to $22,000. The reason they made that increase is they're wanting to buy their own tools, or not buy their own tools, but wanting to buy tools for the garage that stays at the garage versus using their own tools. Any questions on the central garage budget?
Okay, then we have under sidewalk, the crosswalk project for $25,000.
Can I speak to that as well?
Yes.
So, me and Melody's really looked into this, on what, find my phone in here somewhere. So what this is the crosswalks project that we got approved. It was well before my time, back in 2012, 2013. We got approved an 80-20 grant to redo the sidewalks. And then I think we got another grant, or I'm not 100% certain, but sorry, Tracy, go ahead.
I was going to say, they kind of revisited this grant. I think
Yes.
there was a change. I don't know if it had to do with the delay, but they went back to this.
So ever since then, nothing's been really moved on this project. So it's been kind of stagnant, and we added $25,000 to that budget to add in for our part of the 20% of this. With that being said, I don't feel that that's even going to touch with supplies, materials, contracted services going through the roof. Baker would have to come back up and redesign and revisit this again, give us a new estimate on this. This grants through the West Virginia, or the Department of Highways. It's my suggestion that we close this grant and not follow up on it, and we could use that $25,000 elsewhere. Now, I am looking, if we did use money from that, if we did use money from the grant, if we have to repay it, I don't have a figure on that yet.
I have that figure. It would be
Okay.
just under $17,000.
Okay, so that's money that we probably have to pay back. Melody's checking on that now, but our sidewalks are nowhere near ready to be ADA compliant, and that's going to cost us a lot more money than we can give credit for right now. It's going to be a nightmare, but it's something I'm willing to definitely take on later, but the money that we have budgeted right now is not going to touch it.
So the scope of that project was what area? I mean, what sidewalks were they supposed?
So originally it was citywide as far as the crosswalks, but now that had to be scaled down to what the money that, so it was originally, I think, budgeted out for 115,000, 121,000 or something like that.
115.
And then,
115.
so they was willing to scale down the project and do like that, but we're only going to be touching a few crosswalks. And like I said, we're going to end up spending more money on having to redesign everything, bring back in inspections. Baker would have to come back up, and I think we paid them like $10,000 to do inspections.
So the part of the just under 17,000 was for design services from Michael Baker, a little bit of advertising, but the majority of that was previous design services, probably in between 2012 to 2015 that we paid.
So if you're suggesting that we just close out that grant and just eat the 17,000 that we've already?
We may have to pay that back to the Department of Highways because that was their 80% back to us.
Oh, that was part of the 80%.
at this point. I'm weighing the cost of moving forward with this grant versus, taking the loss on it right now. That's something we can speak about at a different time, but as far as budgetary, 25,000, I'm not sure what we want to do with that, honestly.
I think definitely needs to be looked at so that we're not losing 17,000 I mean, I don't know whether we need to lose $17,000, but I think we should look at it.
I totally agree.
Okay.
So we'll leave the
Josh, if I may take us
Absolutely.
back one line item, under capital outlay equipment, did you say that was for tools?
That was for tools. And that's about the majority I know about it, honestly. Apparently they're using their own tools to work in that garage, and they want to buy tools that stay in the garage. So,
Okay. Are they wanting some specialized tools that really address very specific things in their work?
I'm concerned, so my concerns with that is they're looking at possible top-of-the-line tools that might not be needed. That was my first week coming in when we made that budget, so I didn't really get a chance to investigate that as much, but I'm willing to look at that more, or maybe moving that to the following year.
Yeah.
I would definitely, I mean, I don't know what kind of agreement that they come into that department with, that they have to use their own tools. If they do have to use their own tools, they should be reimbursed for that instead of, the one thing that concerns me is that tools have a tendency to disappear or be abused. And so I would say that it needs to be looked at a lot more before we just make a blanket decision on that.
I'd like to ask too, I mean, is this specifically hand tools? Are we talking about like wheel balancing stuff or,
As far as I'm
tire
concerned,
removal?
it's hand tools from what I understood when I made this budget with the central garage.
Yeah, I think we're talking about wrenches, Clint.
So that, I'm willing to defer that until I can do some more investigation. So Tracy, if you want to, you can take that back down to the original budget if you'd like, or it's up to them what they'd
You
like
want
to
it do. back to 19,000?
Yes.
Okay. Are you all comfortable with moving it back to what the current budget is?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't feel comfortable asking for an increase that I don't know the full details about, so.
Okay.
Sorry, just for clarification, are we leaving the 25,000 in for crosswalks?
That's,
Yeah.
I think since.
Okay,
we're
Yeah,
not sure what
until
to
we
do.
figure that out a little bit.
Okay, then we have the airport authority at 5,000, public transit at 5,000. Recycling is going up to 7,000, increasing from 1,750 due to yard waste being put under that, as well as the glass recycling. Is that correct? Yes. Okay.
Excuse me, Tracy.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what the increase in recycling is? I mean, that's a pretty big jump.
Well, it's the increase, or adding the yard waste as part of the general fund.
So previously,
Recycling,
the
mhm.
yard waste was part of, I think, the sewer funds,
That's
if I'm not
correct.
mistaken. And now we're accruing that part of the recycling.
Yes.
So that got moved over to the general funds versus sewer. It shouldn't have been in sewer to begin with. And then now we're accruing that as part of recycling and class recycling, so.
That makes sense, okay.
Yeah, it was
Thank you.
initially years ago in sewer due to the SEP order, I believe. Is that right? Or the consent decree order.
Yeah, the original consent decree.
Right, but that finished up, I think, back in 2017, and it just no change was ever made.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Local health, which is the health department at 4,000. Parks and Rec is at 305,796. And included in that is the 50% of the hotel tax attributed to that. The Visitors Bureau is the Depot Welcome Center. That budget is at 80,050. And we're down to the Phil Gaynor Community Center. So utilities are budgeted at 25,000, travel at 200, maintenance of buildings and grounds at 4,000. Nothing for postage, advertising would be 1,000. Dues and subscriptions is at $6,000. Professional services, 1,000. Contracted services, 20,000. Refunds, reimbursements, 500. Supplies and materials, 20,000. Capital outlay is at 58,000. That is the annual cost for the bond for all the renovations that was done. 0 for the other interest and penalties. So that comes to 135,700, and that is a reduction of about 54,000 from last year.
I'm curious as to whether or not the utilities, is that including or taking into consideration that there's air conditioning now?
Well, I don't know, this came from the manager, but if you look at the previous year, we only spent $13,000. And I think maybe with the efficiency of having something new, we'll just hope that it plays out. But through December, they spent about 11,000 of that.
And the contractual services went up. Am I reading that right? Yeah.
You are reading that right, that's correct. Trying to think what Chris would have in the budget. That part of that budget may be, he is requesting a part-time AmeriCorps worker, where the Phil Gaynor Center will pay $3,000 for that, and Parks is going to cover an additional $4,000 to help with the after-school program there.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Okay. Any other questions about the Phil Gaynor Community Center? Okay, then we have Historic Landmarks Commission, $1,500. Civic Promotions, Jessica.
That's me. I actually need to make an adjustment to this because I didn't think about this when I was working on this budget earlier. But because the census population has changed, we need to reduce it. So I would take that down to, let's call it 6,800, I think. So what that is the, what we're permitted to set aside per annum, per population. And the use of that is, we've used it for a couple different things. Most recently, we helped in collaboration with the Development Authority and some other partners to create the, not our city welcome guide, but I can never remember, the guide that brings, help me, Robbie.
Explore.
Thank you for that publication that came out not too long ago. So it can be used to promote the city in different ways. There's about 4 or 5 things that are listed in the ordinance that we adopted a few years ago. We can invite different city officials into the city, host them here. Our own city officials and staff can attend events. It's all, based upon promoting the city and how we can help support that. So it's not a lot of money, but so we try to be really strategic about how we use that, and I think that partnership with the Development Authority was a really good use of those funds and a good example of how that money can be used. So we're reducing that again just based on the census. I'll take that down to 6,800.
Okay, then we have the library contribution at 7,000. Beautification is at 85,000. That is contracted services for flowers, watering, and the parking, City Hall parking area. And then the 50,000 is basically what's been put in streetscape for a total of 85,415. Any questions regarding that? And then we have 0 for matching grants. So our difference, we have 282,304 excess expenditures over our projected revenues. And if I can just add a couple things. Remember, our health insurance premiums have increased 5% for this upcoming budget year. One thing that's really hard to budget for is we have to have our budget into the state the end of March. Open enrollment for PEIA insurance is in April into early May. So if employees happen to change their health coverage one way or the other, it can either increase the cost or decrease the cost. So that's something to think about as well. And our property liability insurance generally goes up somewhere between 3 to 4% as well. And as mentioned at the council meeting, all departments are seeing an in-cost of either fuel surcharges, cost of materials, getting materials. It's been a difficult year to plan. But, anybody have any questions before we start discussing further things?
Could you go back and under beautification, the supplies and materials were 50, what is that?
That has generally been the amount allotted to the streetscape budget.
The streetscape?
Mhm.
And that's like streetscape, the furnishings,
That's correct.
the money that's allocated to Main Street, also the hanging baskets for Main Street's projects, for
Well,
the furnishings and
The hanging baskets are part of the flower contract,
that's,
unless
and
there's,
that's under what budget?
that's under beautification
Yeah,
as well.
right.
Mhm, yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you, Tracy, and thank you, admin officers. I'm going to call for a short recess here. I apologize to the public, but I have to go real quick. So it's been over 2 hours, so 10 minutes, we'll be right back. We'll finish our discussion.
So